Hello and welcome to the class presentation of Community HIS, a HERD report presented by Paul Pitcher, Research Director at Class Enterprises. I'm Graham Triggs, Senior Research Manager at Class, and I'll be the host of the web presentation today. Just wanted to give you a quick overview of Class Enterprises and who we are. We were founded in 1996. We're located in Orem, Utah. If you're not familiar with Orem, it's just south of Salt Lake City. We've been monitoring and reporting on vendor performance in the healthcare information space over the years, and we actually provide providers with on software services and medical equipment. We do about 2,000 provider interviews per month and speak to about 4,500 different hospitals and 3,000 doctors' offices and clinics. So if you're interested in looking at some of that information, you can actually access our website and look at the rich data that we've got for you there. Our mission statement is obviously to help improve healthcare technology delivery by honestly, accurately, and impartially measuring vendor performance for our provider partners. And we've actually taken some great strides over the past few months to be able to provide some of this information on the market share in community hospitals. Paul's going to talk a little bit about some of the things going on in the space. Paul, can you talk a little bit about and help me understand the current state of the community hospital market?
Thank you, Graham. Let me start by introducing the purpose of this research. Class, for a number of years, has done measurements regarding clinical market share in the larger hospital space, but commencing with 2010 data, we felt it was appropriate to begin measuring market share for the community hospital space. The community hospital space, as Class defines it, are those organizations less than 200 beds. This research then is an iteration of research we did last year. It's important to emphasize that our measurement, while it seems almost a year old, because it is a measurement of activity from 2011, but it illustrating those transactions that are happening in the community hospital space for clinicals across the vendors.
Looks like Epic's really dominating the market right now in terms of new wins.
Yes, that's absolutely true, Graham. Epic, while not traditionally known as a vendor that sells into the community hospital space, continues to show some great growth and no losses. Literally in 2011, Epic had only new implementations to accomplish and has not lost a customer in the community hospital space.
It looks like Meditech is bleeding pretty severely, but they pretty much dominate the community space currently. Is that correct?
By market share, that is accurate. Of course, Meditech has multiple offerings through their Magic, their client server, and their latest version that they call 6.0. But let me take a minute and kind of walk through each of these vendors, if I might, and kind of describe how we group them and how we see what's going on in terms of the industry. Begin with, you'll notice looking at this graph, for example, and I'm going to spend just a few minutes on this graph, but we characterized Epic, Cerner, and McKesson as vendors that are healthy vendors. In saying that, what we mean is these are vendors who are experiencing some good growth and relatively few losses. So Epic, Cerner, with their newer offering of that was targeted for the community hospital space of CommunityWorks, is also beginning to show a lot of growth. And then McKesson Paragon is also showing a lot of success. McKesson recently made an announcement, or it was actually a year ago, with their Better Health 2020 announcement, that Paragon would be their go-forward solution for all hospitals. So Paragon, previously being known as a community hospital solution, will now be the solution that is offered for larger hospitals as well. And so you can see in the Paragon graph that some of the wins there are actually upgrades coming from, for example, the Horizon customer base. Let me continue, if I might, Graham, to talk about some of the vendors that are that we designated as revolving door vendors. Now, that maybe is not necessarily a pleasant moniker, but what we're trying to emphasize there is that these are vendors that are experiencing not only wins but also a fair amount of losses. When we talk about vendors like Healthland, CPSI, or HMS, it's not uncommon for some of the dissatisfied customers using CPSI as an example to say, you know, we're looking at maybe transitioning over to Healthland or HMS and talking to a Healthland customer, having that similar conversation. So these revolving door vendors experiencing good wins but also some losses would also include Siemens with their Sorian offering and Allscripts, which traditionally has not been considered a community hospital vendor. perhaps being a little bit too much horsepower for the community hospital market. One of the things we noticed in the marketplace this year is that vendors that we talked about a little bit last year were getting more market awareness and attention and traction. Vendors such as Prognosis, NextGen, and Razor Insights are starting to make some progress in taking away from a few of the other vendors or winning deals, perhaps due to some of their newer technology and the fact that they're not encumbered with legacy technology. And the expectation is that these vendors will continue to grow. Then there are the vendors that we call the at-risk vendors, the vendors such as Quadramed that really has not seen much action from their QCPR solution, or Meditech that's experienced some struggles with 6.0 and is experiencing a good number of losses. And then, of course, as we know, Horizon has had a significant number of losses, and it's no longer being offered as a solution.
Right. What do you think are the key takeaways from this report?
So one major takeaway that we noticed, and I have to emphasize that this particular report was not a measurement of a vendor's performance, rather, but of market activity. But what we know in our takeaway and from our research is that almost 1 in 3 of the customers who've recently implemented are dissatisfied. Now, there are various reasons for the dissatisfaction. It may be the fact that these organizations are understaffed, are dealing with technology that perhaps is not familiar to them, that they're dealing with meaningful use requirements and other requirements as well. But it's fair to say that 1 in 3 organizations are taking a hard look to see, did they select the solution that's appropriate for their environment. A class is going to take a hard look at this through some measurements we'll do in 2013 by way of a performance report. We have done performance report measurements in the past in the community hospital space, and so we will encourage our listeners here to look towards that research that we will conduct and share next year. Another takeaway, as we had mentioned, is that there are some newer entrants to this space, and it's an opportunity, first of all, for legacy vendors to up their game, because they have to understand that these newer entrants are not carrying the baggage of legacy technology, and they're going to win some deals if the legacy vendors are not paying attention. One of the things we're seeing in the industry, and I'm sure our listeners are aware of as well, and that is that there is a lot of market consolidation going on. Healthcare, as we know, is a low-margin industry that is becoming more and more difficult all the time to remain profitable. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of consolidation, IDNs consuming smaller hospitals and smaller organizations, and this is certainly affecting the buying trends in the industry. So we see organizations that were previously using perhaps a Healthland maybe transitioning to an Epic, and that again is then, in some part at least, reasons for why we're seeing wins among Epic, Cerner, and some others.
Now this obviously represents the current state of the market. What changes do you see happening in this little chart over the next few years?
Well, we will continue to see some transitions and some vendors win and lose market share. I think it's fair to say that we're going to keep a close eye on those vendors that have legacy technology. They're going to have to retool and adapt to changing circumstances if they're going to continue their market share. Vendors like Epic will continue to experience growth. Vendors such as Healthland and HMS are going to have to prove that they have the wherewithal to remain in this space and continue to grow. There are other vendors out there that we'll be watching to see whether they make progress, whether that the other category, for example, which currently makes up Prognosis, NextGen, Razor Insights, whether they grow or not. So there'll be much to watch here over the coming years.
Anything that surprised you on this slide here, Paul, in terms of new acute care contracts?
I don't think there's anything that surprised us here in class, but it's a great illustration of what's going on and helps the reader to understand how the vendor really plays in the community hospital space. So if you look at Epic, for example, you can see that they have wins across the organization size from the critical access all the way up to 200-bed facilities. We, of course, for purposes of this report, aren't measuring above 200-bed. But then you can see, for example, quickly illustrated, that Healthland really is a solution for organizations, for the most part, that are less than 100 beds.
Right.
And so that illustration continues for all of the other vendors out here, and it's a quick at-a-glance to help a reader understand how, to some extent at least, how well this vendor is suited to their particular size.
Traditionally, obviously, Epic has played in the over 200-bed space. That's one thing that really surprised me about the slide, is that they're really starting to gain some traction in the community space. Where are the wins coming from?
Well, this slide here, it speaks to whether organizations are standalone organizations that are making purchases or whether they're affiliated with an integrated delivery network. If you look at HMS, for example, one of the things we know about HMS is that fully 2/3 of their business comes from IDNs that typically, for example, for-profit organizations, for-profit hospitals that are using HMS across their organization. And this slide then, if you look at each of the vendors, you can get a feel to understand, is this a solution that works well in an IDN, or is it suited for a standalone hospital?
Now, obviously, Epic and Cerner are increasing their market share. Help us understand what vendors they're taking that share from.
You know, as you look at this slide, it helps to understand that a healthy vendor is one that is winning business from all types of the market. That is, they're winning business from all other vendors. So if you look at Epic, who clearly seems to be the healthiest in terms of wins from our report, correct, we can see that they have a very large mix of other vendors from which they are winning business, as well as they are implementing into some hospitals that previously had no clinical information system. And there are other vendors on this chart as well that have done a fair job of winning from other vendors. So bring clarification to this. If you look along the side of the graph, and you can see it's color-coded which vendors they're winning from, and those in black mean that they previously had no clinical information system. They were essentially on paper. So some vendors really aren't getting a lot of traction in terms of winning from other vendors in the market. Quadramed, for example, has had very little activity, and you can see others there as well.
Why don't you take us through a little bit of detail on some of these vendors? For example, looks like Epic continues to dominate new wins. What are the major reasons behind their success?
Yeah, so Epic, it's fun to talk about Epic. Epic brings a sort of a methodology to the organization that really compels the customer to be successful. I think, to put it in the class words, the Epic doesn't let their customers fail, and that's a large part of their success. Because they are a stable vendor and they have extensive clinical functionality, it takes a lot of the risk out of the organization if they're successful in being able to implement Epic. Now, we know that Epic doesn't sell to a to a critical access facility, but if that facility is aligned with an IDN, then that is a large part of the reason that we're seeing wins. I should also emphasize that we queried Epic to understand why they're having so many wins in the community hospital space, and are they in fact not willing to market to the community hospital space, and that their position has shifted a little bit to support continuum of care for regions that are largely dominated by Epic. They will go in and will now consider selling to a hospital that perhaps would be smaller than they would have sold to previously, in order to provide a continuity of care, if you will, throughout the region in terms of the Epic system.
And what's going on with Healthland?
It is important to mention that in this research, much of our measurement was on Healthland and what they were doing with their classic product, keeping in mind that this was a measurement of activity in 2011. Healthland had acquired a company called American HealthNet, who had offered a product called Claris. Those were the roots of their newer product called Centric. Healthland is in the process of converting customers who are ready to move forward to their new Centric solution, which is their go-forward solution. So last year and this year will be pivotal transition years for Healthland to see if they will be successful in transitioning Classic customers onto Centric. And that's what we see for Healthline going forward. Centric is a newer product. Healthline, of course, is targeted towards the critical access and slightly larger hospital space.
Okay, briefly take us through the rest of the vendors, starting with Cerner.
Thank you, Graham. Let's go ahead and skip that commentary. Cerner, as we had indicated, has recently created a solution that is targeted for organizations that previously perhaps could not have afforded Cerner, but now can get into a Cerner offering by way of CommunityWorks, which is now a hosted solution. So it is somewhat early, because Cerner has, I believe, approximately 30 customers running on CommunityWorks. There are many other hospitals, smaller than 200 beds, that are running on Cerner that are now not on CommunityWorks. But the CommunityWorks solution is a slimmed-down version of Cerner that offers a price point that might be more attractive to some organizations. Cerner is a vendor that has been able to dedicate an integrated solution, and they have a good, strong track record in terms of offering clinicals. CPSI continues to show growth, again, traditionally with the critical access space in slightly larger, perhaps 50-bed, 60-bed hospitals. CPSI is a legacy solution, and they are going to have to retool, I think, if they're going to remain strong in the industry, but they continue to show growth, and they continue to offer their product at a price point which is attractive to smaller hospitals who perhaps can't afford the breadth and the depth of an Epic. So we'll continue to see CPSI in this space, and we'll watch to see if they can make the transition towards newer technologies. McKesson Paragon is an interesting story. It is a solution that has proven very effective for larger organizations in the 200-bed space. Traditionally, I think of Paragon as running in an organization that is 150 beds to 200 beds. This now, again, is the go-forward strategy for Paragon, and they're trying to demonstrate that they can scale to organizations larger. But Paragon, I think, is struggling in trying to bring up some of the older Horizon customers at the same time. So I think there are some stresses to Paragon and the activity that's going on, and we'll continue to watch and monitor and report on their progress. But they have had a good track record in delivering out Paragon, and they have demonstrated some strength in keeping their promises and keeping to timelines as defined by their customer base, and really living up to for the most part, to commitments they make to their customer base as it relates to future enhancements and development for the product.
Okay. What about HMS?
HMS is a vendor that's been out there for a long time. They are a vendor that has some market awareness, but you don't see a lot of marketing coming out of HMS, and so they're kind of a quiet vendor. Again, as we'd indicated earlier, that they show a lot of strength in implementing into organizations that are integrated delivery networks. That really is their sweet spot. They run on an AS400, or what's now called an I-Series platform, and have some technologies layered over that for an end-user interface to make it more of a web look and feel. Once again, they're a vendor that performs. Perhaps their sweet spot might be, I would say, maybe 70 to 80 beds for HMS. Meditech is a vendor that, as we'd indicated, is starting to show some struggles. The word is out as it relates to some of the challenges regarding version 6. There are some organizations who've had some good success with 6, but version 6 presents some obstacles that force the customer to make a decision. For example, if I'm a Meditech Magic customer and my choice is to go to version 6, I'm certainly going to recognize that going to version 6 is equivalent to going out and implementing any other product perhaps that's on the market. So why don't I go out and take a look at the rest of the market? That, along with some of the other challenges regarding quality of version 6, I think is keeping Meditech hopping, and they're struggling to maintain market share. They have historically been, while not a vendor that's known as a cutting-edge vendor, they have traditionally been able to show low risk in implementing their product into the community hospital space. while they're still seeing some sales, they're seeing some losses. Siemens introduced Saurian quite a number of years ago. They continue to support a mid-series 4 version, but those mid-series 4 customers are leaving Siemens, and Siemens is of course, encouraging the migration to the Saurian suite. The Saurian suite had struggled in the past from a clinical perspective, but they have made some great progress in improving the product and addressing customer concerns. It is a relatively newer product which offers some rather unique design as it relates to workflow and tasks that can be accomplished by way of workflow.
Okay. And what about Allscripts?
As we had discussed previously, Allscripts really is not a vendor that one thinks of in terms of being a vendor that performs well in the community hospital base. It is a heavy system with technology that might be just a little bit too much for some community hospitals. While they have demonstrated strong clinical functionality, they, again, perhaps play better in organizations that are larger than 200 beds for the community hospital.
You mentioned new entrants into this space, Razor Insights, for example, and Prognosis. Just high level, what's some of the buzz you're hearing about those vendors?
Yeah, it's fun to talk about these vendors because they are newer vendors, and it's difficult to get traction in this industry as a newer vendor. You really have to show that you have great technology, great methodology in implementing and supporting your technology, and that you can support what you've implemented at the same time that you can experience growth and market. And Razor Insights is starting to demonstrate that. I should emphasize that Razor Insights is a vendor that we're seeing really on the smaller end of the community hospital space, the critical access space, as is Prognosis, another vendor. And I believe you got a couple of slides there, if we could maybe hop forward to Prognosis. Prognosis likes to say that they are a solution that can support 150-bed hospitals, but again, we're seeing Prognosis really implemented kind of in the smaller end of the community hospital space. Prognosis is being taxed a little bit with growth and some of the challenges that accompany growth and development at the same time.
Okay. And what are some of the challenges, just to kind of take a look at some of this, what about in terms of the areas that they seem to be struggling? Any insight you might be able to give providers who are on the call today?
Well, Prognosis is looking to create an end-user interface that will be, in their mind, revolutionary. So they're very focused on development, but at the same time, they have to maintain a customer base that has implemented and have to support some of the challenges related to their suite. Prognosis, for example, doesn't have a lab product, so you have to support Prognosis by way of an outside lab product. I think Prognosis uses Orchard. Prognosis will continue to, we anticipate seeing them demonstrate continued growth, but we're going to watch to see that they can overcome some of the challenges from some of their quick rollouts that they've brought to the market.
Now, if you're implementing a system like this, Paul, either you don't have one currently and you want to get one, or you're planning on replacing your current HIS, what are some of the things that providers need to be aware of in terms of implementation gotchas?
Well, rather than implementation gotchas, let me come at this from a different perspective, if I might, Graham. There is somewhat of a relationship between the size of the organization that a vendor supports and their performance scores. Let me be clear on that. Vendors that tend to perform in the critical access space, or that kind of dominate that space, the vendors like the HMS, the Healthlands, the CPSIs, in general tend to have slightly lower scores than those vendors that support larger hospitals in the 175 range, etc. Those vendors such as Meditech, Paragon, Cerner, and others. Part of the reasons for that could be the depth and breadth of the functionality. Understand that there are always going to be challenges for hospitals that have minimal staff available to support the technology. And that becomes much of the challenge for smaller critical access hospitals that might only have a half an FTE or an FTE that's dedicated in part to IT and to running the accounting department. So when hospitals don't have dedicated information technology specialists, they're going to struggle with these technologies. And of course, as we know, all hospitals are struggling to come up to meaningful use and to reach and achieve levels of HIMSS stages, such as HIMSS stage 5 and 6, etc. The graph that you just brought up is a great illustration of some of what we're seeing in terms of go-live performance, overall scores versus implementation services performance. So just quickly illustrated, we can see that McKesson Paragon is having some better implementation scores than HMS as of recent, and you can make a quick comparison to the scores as well. Now, these are some guidelines to help some of our listeners understand what are some of the successes and challenges being experienced by customers in the respective customer base of the vendors we've discussed today.
Now, just to briefly sum up for folks, what are some of the major things that you learned through our research this year?
So this is a great illustration. We encourage our listeners to look deeper, understand what your challenges are and what you're trying to accomplish. If you're looking to roll out great clinical functionality, do you have the resources to support it? Are your physicians going to be supportive of this? Are they going to be the roadblock? Look and see what your obstacles are and how you'll tackle them, and then go see and measure which vendors perhaps are the best fit for you. If you are a 150-bed hospital, it's not likely that you're going to be satisfied with a Healthland or a CPSI. Or conversely, if you're a critical access hospital, you might find that Paragon may be a little bit too much for you. There's a lot to be researched, a lot to be learned. Understand that you don't want to be in that 1/3 of customers that feel like you made the wrong selection. So we would encourage you to do your due diligence, and where class can assist you, we'll be glad to support you with some great performance data along the way.
Now, Paul, we had a question come in during the presentation. One of our people online asked, Meditech obviously was a net zero. They obviously had as many losses as they did wins this year. Is that just for this year, or do you see that trend continuing with Meditech?
It's hard to say whether the trend will continue. My personal opinion is that it probably will continue for a little bit. I think the burden is going to be on Meditech to turn things around, to demonstrate that Meditech 6.0 is going to be stable enough that customers who are running some of their legacy solutions will be comfortable in making that transition. There are many customers in the wings who are saying, do I really want to take on 6.0 right now, hearing what I'm hearing? So really, the ball is in the court of Meditech to prove that they can support this industry with 6.0.
But that data does just represent this particular year's wins and losses, correct?
And in fact, this year's wins and losses, of course, representing activity to happen in 2011.
Okay. Well, we want to thank Paul for taking the time to share some of the insights from the report with us. We also want to express our appreciation for those who joined us today, and thank you for your patience. We've had a lot of information to go through in a very short time today, but wanted to also let you know that if you would like to get more access to in-depth information in this report, you can actually get a copy of the report by contacting a class representative. You can do that in a variety of ways. You can actually call us at area code 801-226-5120, and I'll give that number again just in a moment. Or you can actually email us at classinfo, and class, of course, is spelled K-L-A-S, so classinfo@classresearch.com, and we will be able to forward that to a class representative who can help you out as well. Again, the phone number is 801-226-5120. And you can, of course, always get more information at our website, www.classresearch.com. That will also have information on upcoming web broadcasts. For example, next week we will be having a webinar on business intelligence. So please, if you're interested, join us for that as well. For now, thank you again so much for taking the time to be with us today. Happy holidays to all those out there, and we'll talk to you again next time.